On this episode of Locked On Grizzlies, will the Memphis Grizzlies start and end March like lions or lambs? How is this month going to go for Memphis? Plus, we're going to take a look at the Western Conference, see who we think is going to be a threat long-term for Memphis. And then we're also going to take a look at a weekend against the Portland Trail Blazers. Who the heck's going to play for the Grizzlies this coming couple of games? I don't know. Maybe Damichael Cole does. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Friday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. I am one of your hosts, Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, is it accurate to say award-winning?
The award-winning. There we go.
The award-winning Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. Congratulations, partner. 2 awards from the APSE, Top 10 in Beat Writing, Top 10 Short Feature in Category C. Wonderful stuff from Damichael as a writer, and we'll talk more about that throughout the episode. Well-deserved recognition here for my co-host on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. We are free and available here on Locked On Grizzlies wherever you get podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, YouTube. Literally anywhere and everywhere is good with us. Hopefully you're interacting, making us a part of your podcasting Grizzlies NBA experience each and every day. Damichael Cole, again, so proud of you and so happy for you with your award recognitions. In fairness to Damichael, I didn't tell him I was going to do this. I am just so thrilled to, and I posted it on X, You're a rising star in this industry, buddy, and I'll be able to say one of these days, I knew that guy back before he broke big. Congratulations, well-deserved accolades, partner.
I really appreciate it, Joe. I mean, working with you is definitely one of my treats in this business. But it was, it's fun to be recognized, and we work so hard in this business, and we don't really do it for that, for the recognition, for those type of things. But when it comes, it's a rewarding feeling, as a beat writer, particularly, when you're covering an NBA team and just a beat writer in general. It's a schedule that's unlike many. There are some other jobs that can relate out there, jobs like being a detective or things like that. But hours aren't pretty much scheduled. Like so there are a lot of missed, events for me, a lot of missed birthdays, a lot of missed things that I planned for myself. And then, boom, Grizzlies breaking news happens, and that alters the whole trajectory of my day. But through it all, again, I wouldn't change it for anything. And it's a rewarding feeling, coming here, Locked On Grizzlies. And shout out to the listeners as well, because a lot of those story ideas come from you guys. The things that you sometimes are the most passionate about lead me into ideas, the things that I should write about as well. Joe mentioned, the short feature that I won. That actually, I know you remember the story because we talked about it, Joe. It came from the Derrick Rose story that I wrote about the basketball and him wanting to spend the rest of his pretty much like basically saying that he wanted to stay in Memphis even beyond playing basketball here, buying a home here and all those things. But thank you everyone for your support, and we're gonna keep going.
Well deserved, like I said, and it's wonderful to have a chance to talk Grizzlies basketball with you almost each and every day, Damichael, and I look forward to continuing to do so. Let's start this episode of the show looking at the old phrase, march in like a lion, out like a lamb, right? Yesterday was Leap Day. Today is the first day of March, and there's the old saying, in like a lion, out like a lamb, in like a lamb, out like a lion. Weather, craziness, however you want to phrase it, the Ides of March right there in the middle. That's kind of connected to it loosely, kind of, sort of. Anyway, don't need to go down the history lesson. Nobody's going to be Brutus in this particular episode of Locked On Grizzlies. But I am curious, Damichael, going into a busy weekend for Memphis, home and home back-to-back against the Portland Trail Blazers. Obviously, you have lots of stuff going on in the Western Conference that we'll talk more about, teams at the top that may stick around as Memphis tries to make their return to contention next year. The Grizzlies were 2-10 in February, Damichael, and I'm curious, looking at the schedule, looking at the current state of things for the Grizzlies, the recent injury updates for Desmond Bane and Marcus Smart, do you think that March is going to be like a lion or a lamb for these Grizzlies as the season comes to its close, entering and coming closer eventually to April?
It's going to be tough. And look, this is the time of the year. This is where the diehard fans start to stick out, because a lot of people are about to start checking out at this point. Like, being honest, like a lot of people say, "Oh, it's the last month of the season," and they'll probably mail it in. But you know what? This is for the fans that care about those 12th through the 15th man roster spots. This is for the fans who care about who are going to be the 3 guys on 2-way contract next season, because you have multiple second round picks and you have 3 2-way spots filled right now. So who are going to be those 3 guys? That's pretty much what the rest of the season is for. We've learned enough about Vince Williams, I think, at least in my opinion. Anything else is, it's just him getting more experience. We've learned enough about G.G. Jackson. I'll even say that. Derrick Rose made a great point to me, and I think I mentioned it on here from the standpoint of, some of the things that G.G. Jackson will be asked to work on. Like, I know I wrote about it and I talked about it on here, how he's going to be put in more of a primary ball handler, playmaking role. Derrick Rose pointed out that that's something you usually work on in the offseason. And the point of saying that is, don't have high expectations for him in that role for the rest of the regular season, because he'll have a full off season to really dive into, that type of role. Because coming to Memphis, I'm sure he didn't think, oh yeah, my rookie year, I'm going to have one of the highest usage ratings on the team. Like, that's not what G.G. Jackson probably thought. But that's probably what's about to happen. So I guess that would be Lamb, right?
It would be Lamb. Yeah, it sounds like they're going to be the Lamb.
They're definitely going to be the Lamb here. Man, I love lamb chops too.
Lamb chops are delicious.
Lamb chops are great. It got me thinking about the lamb chops, but there's going to be nothing's going to be well cooked about the rest of this season though. It's going to get a little ugly, but guess what? You got to really dive deep in, Joe, in terms of, this is about the Lamar Stevens. Can he play his way into a roster spot? The Jordan Goodwins, as we mentioned, Scottie Pippen Jr., when he returns, can he solidify a back-end 15-man roster spot, or is he going to stay on that 2-way? And if he stays on the 2-way and you got 2 second-round picks, what does that mean for that? So that's kind of what the rest of this season is about. Yeah, we can keep talking about the idea of Desmond Bane coming back, Marcus Smart coming back, but even Brandon Clark. But at the end of the day, those things are not what take precedent for the rest of the season.
Locked on Lamar Stevens. Woo! I don't know.
Buckle up, baby. Buckle up.
Buckle up. It is about to get hot and steamy on Locked On Grizzlies. Talking about Lamar Stevens for the next 6 weeks. Not only is this season, cooked like in terms of lamb chops, this season, like a poorly cooked steak, is well done. Right. And that is the issue that Memphis faces. We'll talk more about the injury report later.
What are you, Joe? You're a medium rare guy?
I'm a medium rare guy. Absolutely.
I figured. I can tell.
That's the ideal. It's got to be a ribeye and it's got to be medium rare. Right.
Okay,
that's the ideal. And if you need A1 sauce or some sort of steak sauce like that, it's not a good steak. Anyway, this isn't Locked On Steak. Although I would be a good host for Locked On Steak. If we ever expand to a food podcast, count me in for Locked On Steak. I do think that this season has not been a lost one because of the guys you mentioned earlier, Vince Williams, G.G. Jackson.
Yeah.
You can make an argument that at least knowing that those 2 guys should be rotation players, even when the team's trying to be good again, that's a major positive. But this season is going to be like a lamb, and everybody's going to be a lion licking their chops. I don't think Memphis has much incentive to try to get guys like Marcus Smart back. I do think Desmond Bane has reached Ja Morant-esque levels in the organization where if Bane wants to play, he's going to play. I don't think anybody's telling him you're not playing, you're shutting down. I don't think Marcus Smart on the flip side of that is going to be too hard on anybody that says, you know what, Marcus, you've played a lot of basketball. Let's just rest you for the rest of the season. I think it's going to be nice and easy in that particular way. I think that as soon as they're able to get Jaren to a place where he can get some days off, they're definitely going to do that. Maybe keep him. I honestly haven't looked at his games played yet in terms of end of season award eligibility. he might have made himself like a second team all defense type of guy this year. And that could be maybe a topic for a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. I think it's going to be like a Lamb. And I think most nights, 2-10 in February, 2-10-ish, something like that seems about right for March. I just don't see them kind of pushing themselves. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments. We both, Damichael and I, think it's going to be like a Lamb. Are we being too negative? Do you think it's going to be like a Lion? Do you think they're going to push and really kind of show some bright spots? Hopefully Desmond Bane returns. Let us know what you think in the comments below. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to take a look at the standings in the Western Conference. If Memphis is going to be a contender again, that means somebody else is going to have to drop or something's going to shift. How is that going to look? How is that going to work? We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Grizzlies. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all of your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live save game parlays, exclusive props, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOnNBA and get in on the fun. Have fun with FanDuel. Again, FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn and shoot your shot with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Big fan of FanDuel. I know Damichael is as well. As big of a fan as he can be. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are continuing our conversation talking about the Western Conference and who's going to hang around as the Grizzlies hopefully rise back to prominence. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I am Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, the award-winning Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. I am his co-host. I am one of his biggest cheerleaders, I like to think at this point. And between the two of us, you've come to the right place for Memphis Grizzlies content. Now, the Grizzlies are at the bottom of the Western Conference, and they're probably going to stay there, right? Damichael and I talked about this idea of them being a lamb for the month of March and then probably into April as well, even with the return of Desmond Bane, maybe of Marcus Smart. But again, that injury report read like Smart's probably not coming back, and Bane probably is. You look at the Western Conference, you have teams that have taken advantage of the Grizzlies' leap year, right? Or gap year, if you want to call it that. The two that stick out for me, Damichael, are the Minnesota Timberwolves, who the Grizzlies recently saw, and the Oklahoma City Thunder, right? Those are the two teams that seem to be benefiting the most from Memphis taking a tumble, hopefully just for 1 year. Assuming the Grizzlies rise back up, right? Assuming they move back into Western Conference contention, do you see either of those teams falling or fading? Do you think one is more likely to fade than the other? People talk about Oklahoma City's core. They compare it to Memphis. I've seen some folks on X talk about how the OKC Thunder, they have a better core than Memphis does at this point. So many assets for trade. Do you think the Thunder are here to stay? The Timberwolves, both? Like, how do you see Memphis? And again, this is kind of a long-term question that we certainly can address more completely in the offseason. But I was just thinking about this the other day. These are the two teams in particular that have benefited the most from Memphis's fall from grace for this season. Can they both stick around in a Western Conference where the last 2 years, the 2 seed, figures to be back in that mix again?
It just shows you how fast life changes in the NBA. And Joe, you've heard me say it 100 times, and everyone who tunes into Locked On Grizzlies probably heard me say it a couple times as well. I don't really buy too much into the idea of, a team is going to be around for the next 7-8 years from, let me say this the correct way, from the standpoint of a year, this is a year that sets a team up for a potential championship year. Like this year, Oklahoma City should be wanting to win the NBA championship. I know, the general thought is going to be, they'll be back if they lose. But guess what? You remember 2011, 2012, OKC Thunder. Everyone just, they lost to the Heat. No worries. Russell Westbrook, James Harden, Kevin Durant, they'll be back. And they never got back. They never got back. And that was arguably one of the most talented young cores we have ever seen in NBA history. When the Grizzlies lost to Golden State, there's no sweat. Roster. No Steven Adams. no Brandon Clark, no Tyus Jones, DeAnthony Melton. The list goes on. So many different players for the Memphis Grizzlies now. And it just goes to show you how quickly life can change in this league. The point that I'm making is I do believe that that's kind of what we've seen here. 2 years ago, the Grizzlies were what a lot of people believe the Oklahoma City Thunder have become. And there's this idea that, oh, yeah, the Thunder are going to be around for a while. And I completely agree. Like, I agree. But next year, the Grizzlies could retake that throne. I mean, they could come back and retake that throne. The Thunder could go through, theoretically, some injury issues, and you got contractual stuff that's going to have to be worked out over there very soon. There's a lot of things that got to be figured out. Of those teams, I think the Thunder is the most likely one to stay relevant because they're so young and they have a little bit more flexibility. Whereas with Minnesota, they're a little bit older, and they're gonna have to probably move some things around. If you looked at them, they're scheduled probably to be a second apron or deep in the first apron next season. That's Minnesota, that is. So, they re-signed Mike Conley, and talking to people out there, it sounded like at one point, that wasn't super likely unless they got him on a discount, which they got him on a nice, a little bit low the mid-level exception number. So they got him on a decent deal for a starting point guard in the NBA. But they're going to have to make some moves. In particular, I'm looking at Naz Reid. We haven't discussed him much from the Grizzlies standpoint.
That's true.
That's probably something Joe might want to get into later eventually. But I'll say this. And this isn't from an insider perspective. This is just my gut feeling. I think he could be the odd man out. Or, just from the standpoint of the dollars are getting tight over there. If they want to be a second apron team, then they'll keep him. But if there's someone, as we saw with the Grizzlies, trading Steven Adams, Naz Reid could be, outside looking in. And we all know how good he is. I mean, we just saw it against the Grizzlies the other day coming off the bench. I think he had 19 points. So I think they got more financial decisions to worry about, whereas Oklahoma City, they don't have to worry about paying, the Jalen Williams and the Chet Holmgrens just yet. That's why they were able to go get a guy like Gordon Hayward, because they have so much cap space. But you know what? I still think when Desmond Bane's back on the floor, John Morant, Jaren Jackson Jr., they'll be right back in that group. And some people have forgotten, Joe. Some people have really forgotten how talented of a young core this Grizzlies squad is. So it'll be fun to see them kind of like leap into that tier.
I do want to caution people. We need to make sure that we're not anointing the Thunder before they do anything really in the postseason. Like, you could argue Minnesota, this group of Minnesota players, has done more in the playoffs than the Thunder have. So what Minnesota does, how Chet handles playoff size and physicality.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that.
I think that's a real big piece of that. And the Thunder are extremely talented, and they have the most flexibility to do whatever the heck they want. So I think OKC over Minnesota is a safe bet. But for this particular season, I would definitely have the Timberwolves moving on further than the Thunder. Although SGA is phenomenal. He's scoring in a way that not many dudes have scored in the NBA in a long time.
I got to see it in the playoffs now.
Extremely consistent. Yeah. That's the only thing that's left for him to truly be a top 5 or 10 player for me. It needs to be done in the postseason, because everybody likes to make fun of where the Grizzlies currently are and talk trash about Ja Morant. Ja Morant has done things that only Michael Jordan, LeBron James at his age have done in the postseason. So I need to see guys like SGA, guys like, Anthony Edwards go and have those kinds of performances like Ja has had, and that will make me sign off on you. But I think both of them are kind of primed to stick around and have success. I do think that when Memphis rises back up, that veteran presence is going to be huge, and how they decide to address the center position, which we'll continue to talk about here on Locked On Grizzlies, is a major piece of that, of course, as well. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we are going to preview a weekend for Memphis at home against the Blazers. Not exactly sure what the heck or who the heck is going to play, but maybe Damichael can provide some insight. We'll talk about that and more coming up next here on Locked On Grizzlies. But first, I want to remind you that Locked On has launched the first ever national Sports 24 streaming channel on YouTube. It's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now, available on the free Fire TV channels app. Big deal over there on Amazon. This episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by the good folks over at PrizePicks. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's demon time over at PrizePicks. Big fan of demon time. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Demons and goblins are the newest and most exciting way to play at PrizePicks. Squares marked with red demons or green goblins get you different payouts. You can now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. Players, stats types that you're picking, highlighting winnings, all sorts of fun stuff can happen over at PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, closing out this episode, talking Portland, Memphis. Interesting weekend ahead. Stick with us. Welcome back to Locked On Grizzlies. I'm Joe Mullinax, joined by my co-host, the award-winning, the critically acclaimed Damichael Cole of the Commercial Appeal there in Memphis, Tennessee. I am grateful to be his co-host each and every time I get a chance to, and we're closing out the week here on Locked On Grizzlies, talking Grizzlies ending March like a lamb. We've talked about the Timberwolves and the Thunder and how the Thunder are better set up long-term, but the Timberwolves are probably better off for a playoff run this season, potentially. Now we're going to take a look at the playoff weekend that isn't, right? Memphis and Portland, one of those rare home-and-home back-to-backs where you play the same team. So the Trailblazers will be in FedEx Forum both Friday night and Saturday night, tonight and Saturday night. And it's going to be interesting to see, A, who actually plays in these games. And Michael, maybe you can illuminate things for us on that front. But then also how you approach them, right? Because these are two of the worst teams in the NBA, Portland and Memphis. What are some things to even look for, you know, whether it's health, continued production from guys like Lamar Stevens, how they all kind of fit together around Jaren, assuming Jaren plays this weekend. The current injury report that the Grizzlies provided, Gigi Jackson may not play, but Luke Kennard, John Conchar, Jaren is out for this first front game of the back-to-back. Obviously, Bane and Clark, Morant, Pippen Jr., Derrick Rose is out again. This is just going to be another one of those weekends, Damichael, where it all kind of hinges on who the heck's actually going to be on the floor for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, you tell you what, you're gonna get a heavy dose of Jordan Goodwin at point guard, and if Gigi Jackson plays, this could be the opportunity we see. Remember, we talked about the idea of him playing that primary playmaker type of role, getting more, on the ball in those situations. I think this could be the first case of that, because guess what? No Jaren Jackson Jr. That's a guy who usually has the ball a lot in his hands. But no Scottie Pippen, who's been out for a while. No Derrick Rose as well. And then Luke Kennard and John Conchar. When you talk about the two guards, the threes or whatever, those are two of the guys who have run offense for the Grizzlies over the last month in that role. So you're likely going to be without them, Luke Kennard dealing with the illness. And then John Conchar, on the other hand, I've seen him, saw him a couple days ago. He wasn't even dribbling, with that hand, where he has the thumb injury. He was basically just shooting one-handed shots with his right hand. So clearly it's bothering him a lot. So he's definitely probably not going to play. And when you factor all those guys out that have been put into primary facilitator type roles, then what do you have left? You got Jordan Goodwin, you got Zaire Williams, who's kind of played some of that role and hasn't really been that good in that role. He's been much better in the secondary facilitator type role. So I think that's one of the things that I'm going to watch for. Gigi Jackson over this weekend should get more opportunities to be put in those type of roles. And he had no assist in the last game. I don't think he's had too many games where he's had multiple assists as of late. So it'll be a good opportunity for him to be able to be a decision maker for himself. It's funny because when I was talking to him about it, he was thinking of it actually from a scorer's perspective. Like, this guy's he's a scorer. Like, when you talk about being put in that primary role, a lot of guys think, oh yeah, I get to get my teammates involved more. And I'm sure, it's not to take anything away from him. I'm sure that's part of it, his thought process too. But he also was looking at it like, You know, I basically paraphrasing here. Don't want to really put any words in his mouth, but he was talking about the ability he'll have to get some shots off the dribble and how it kind of correlates to the game that he's kind of played throughout his NBA. I mean, before his NBA life as a basketball player. That's the main thing I'm watching for personally. Yep, you know, want to see a little bit more of Lamar Stevens that you just mentioned, and a couple other guys as well. But main thing I want to see is Gigi Jackson. If he plays, I think should be a solid chance that he plays. If Gigi Jackson plays, put him on the ball more, and let's see what he can do in that role.
Do you worry about overextending the young Gigi Jackson? Because I feel like, you know, we're talking about Jaren Jackson Jr., assuming Jaren plays on Saturday. Like this kind of feels like them sitting him the front end of a back-to-back. Assuming Jaren plays on Saturday, all season long, we have asked a lot of Jaren, right? The shot creation, the shot blocking, being that number one player, the best two-way player on the floor. He was pretty notably exhausted on Wednesday night, right? He very clearly was being asked to do too much. But he's at this point where he's about to get a max contract. I get it from a Jaren perspective. Gigi, are we pointing at him saying he needs to create off the dribble better, be more of a lead facilitator? Again, he's 19. I'm of the mind I just want him to focus on continuing to score the basketball because that's what this team theoretically, when they're healthy, is going to need him to do off the bench. Is this in your mind? Is it more of a these games don't matter in air quotes, so just let him work on it now? Or is it something that you really do consider for him? Obviously, any growth in your game is important, but I just don't want to overextend the kid who is supposed to be in the G League right now if things were going the way they were supposed to go.
Well, you got to think about the way that the Grizzlies like to run offense too. And Taylor Jenkins will tell you, you know, he wants the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, all of those guys to be able to handle the ball and create for themselves and for their teammates. That's why over the last couple of years, we've seen Desmond Bane go from kind of a spot-up role and then elevate his game, you know, on the ball. We've seen it this season with Vince Williams Jr. I mean, I had no clue he had this.
Neither did VCU people. VCU people also didn't know he had it.
I mean, he's 5 assists is chump change to him at this point. I mean, he's getting 6-7 assists pretty much every game. But Zaire Williams, you know, they've asked him to do more in that role as well. Luke Kennard, you talked about it. One of the first people I remember talking about Luke Kennard going back to the kind of the Detroit playmaking type of role a little bit, and that's kind of what the Grizzlies have allowed him to do. John Conchar playing on the ball, like. It's part of the DNA in the system here. You see Jaren Jackson Jr. Operating like getting the rebound and playing like a point forward type of role as well. I think that's what they want Gigi Jackson to grow into because at the end of the day, when John Morant kicks the ball out to you, you'll hear, you know, when we're courtside, Taylor Jenkins usually yells next action. And that's usually whoever has the ball in their hand creating the next action for the offense. So if that's Gigi Jackson, that's you. You have to create the offense in that situation. So I think this is something that the Grizzlies want to kind of, I guess you could say, groom him for going forward. I'm not expecting the results to be like Vince Williams. You know, Vince Williams basically just is churning out 6-7 assists pretty much every night. You can book it. But in the case of Gigi, like Derrick Rose said, you know, it's something he's going to have to really work on in the off season. And the summer league will be, I think, the first real test where it's like, okay, he looks much more comfortable or better in that role. Right now, you just want him to get the reps because, yes, we talk about the role he's going to play with the Grizzlies when the team is fully healthy, but it's not just going to be catch and shoot. Gigi Jackson's game is more than that. So he's going to have to be someone who can operate in that secondary playmaking type of role. So putting him on the ball kind of can fast track that process, so to speak.
You could definitely argue that Vince Williams Jr. has taken to the facilitation even better than Desmond Bane. And when Bane got drafted, I always thought that him as a spot-up shooter was overblown. I talked about Bane as a creator at TCU before he was drafted. But I do think that you got to give Vince Williams Jr. his props on that because, again, I expected it from Bane. Maybe not quite this good, but I expected it from him. I did not expect it at all from Vince Williams Jr., and he's doing it at a comparable level at this point. I hear you, and I think you're right. I'm just nervous about asking a 19-year-old to do all that. But it's going to be fascinating to watch it play out over the rest of the season. The Summer League question is going to be a good one for a future episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Gigi Jackson probably should play, what does Vince Williams Jr. play? Like those sorts of things will be
Yeah.
good conversations down the road. Thank you guys so much for checking out this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Remember, we are on Amazon, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe. Also, remember that you can check us out as part of the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. That's also on Amazon Fire TV and the free channels portion. Check us out at all of those places. Check out all the great podcasts and all the great hosts that are part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Damichael, the next time that we're together, we can talk about the weekend that was, the guys that played, the guys that didn't play, and continue to look ahead to the next several games for Memphis, and maybe kind of take a quick glance at the lottery again and see where Memphis fits. You know, we talked about the top of the Western Conference. Maybe we need to look at the bottom again and see where the Grizzlies are in the lottery standings coming out of a weekend against another lottery team in the Trailblazers.
Yeah, that's going to be a big takeaway for us, just seeing where the Grizzlies stand as we go into March, because now, we get to March on the NCAA side of things. There's going to be a lot of movement on the draft boards. We've seen in the past players like Dante DiVincenzo kind of elevate up the draft boards fast because of the way they played in March. So interested to see how that plays out because, this Grizzlies team, like, they're starting to kind of round into form from a chemistry perspective, so to speak, because of all the guys that they're settling in, so I think that's going to be good for us to turn our attention to there. But speaking of chemistry too, Joe, how about us? Blue hoodies, both
blue
of us,
and
man.
blue,
and we rarely wear white, and we both wore white the last episode. I think we're in our mid-season form right now too.
Mind meld. We are in our mind meld era here on Locked On Grizzlies between Damichael Cole and myself. And that's a good thing, since I'm currently in a mind meld with an award-winning writer in Damichael Cole. For the wonderful Damichael Cole, I am Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Have a wonderful weekend, Grizzlies fans. Enjoy the basketball. I look forward to being back with you on Monday, as does Damichael, I'm sure. Stay locked in. Amazon, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, all those places. Have a good one.